Hey everyone, Andy here. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast that I still don't know what the full name of it is, but today on this episode, I have a very exciting guest. I have Cori Arnold. She's a self proclaimed finance nerd. She has an MBA in finance. She's written 3 books on various money topics, and she shares financial education to her 126,000 follower Twitter account, which is pretty cool. I got a lot of catching up to do there. And she also runs an amateur pet rescue. Well, not really, but kind of. Uh, Now, the really interesting part about her story is what I want to share here on the podcast, which is the fact that she has gone from $260,000 in debt to a millionaire in 10 years, which is wild. And even more wild is she wasn't born into money. She didn't inherit money or marry into money. She did this all herself. And I think there's some really valuable lessons that all of you can learn from her as we talk through all this. So, hello, Cori. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. So let's start off with a really high level question, and then we'll dive in deeper to your story and the specifics. But um, let's say there's lots of people listening who are in a similar situation. They have debt and they're a little overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. They want to get out of debt and they want to be financially secure and financially free. I'm somebody like that. I was $86,000 in debt, not quite as much as you, which is very impressive. You're able to pay that off so fast, but I was able to go from lots of debt to millionaire in about the same amount of time. So it's obviously possible. There's 2 of us on this podcast who've done this thing. So what is kind of the high level view of the fastest way you can go from that situation to financially free?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I had heard a lot of financial experts. I had actually taken Dave Ramsey's financial piece in my early 20s. So I had heard all of the advice, pay off debt, pay yourself first, invest. I had heard all that advice, but it hadn't sunk in. And when it finally sunk in was actually when I changed my mindset. So I had 2 major turning points. The first, I was actually watching a Susie Orman special on TV where she brought out this woman on stage, and she brought out this woman also had spending issues like myself, and she brought out this woman's rack of clothes from her closet, which was supposedly worth $6,500. And then she brought out a table with a pile of cash on it worth $6,500. And she asked the woman, would you rather have the cash or the clothes? And this sounds like such an obvious question. I'm sure for all the natural savers out there, they're wondering, what I was thinking. But for me, as a natural spender, it just, for some reason, this question kind of turned the light bulb on for me. And I finally realized like how much money I was wasting at the stores, just buying junk that I really didn't need. So for me, it was kind of a mindset shift that I really needed. That was the first turning point. The second turning point was I actually decided prior to this, I had actually written out my assets and my debts, and I saw that I had a negative net worth, but it wasn't enough for me to actually do anything about it until finally one day I added the interest rates to those debts, and then I calculated how much interest I was paying. And I realized I was paying about $16,000 a year in interest. And this was the turning point. I mean, $16,000 a year at the time, I was not making that much money. So this was a huge percentage of my paycheck that was going straight to interest. I wanted to retire early, and I knew if I kept this interest, kept paying this debt, that it just wasn't possible. So that was the beginning for me, and I think really that's the beginning for anyone. They've got to really understand what their desire is. Like, do they really want to get out of debt and start to change their mindset?
Yeah, that's super cool. So yeah, I was gonna ask you to share that Susie Orman story because I thought when I heard you say that on a different podcast, I thought that was such a like underrated like exercise that people should go through. And I feel like I've heard people talk about well, I'm spending this amount at a restaurant, and then I think about how many hours at work it takes me to pay that off. Various things like that.
Exactly. Very,
Exercises to
yeah.
kind of contextualize maybe spending issues. And so that's super cool. Yeah. So, what is it like? So, obviously you can spend money on all this stuff and you can rack up all this debt and stuff like that. So like, what, how do people get into that situation that like that downward spiral to where you spend, max out a credit card, then you get the next card. And like, how do you get in a situation where you never think to stop yourself or you never go through those exercises? Like, how do you get into that spiral and fail to get out?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from personal experience how I got into it. Again, I didn't come from any money. We were kind of actually at the poverty threshold. I went to a very expensive school, got my bachelor's degree from a school I couldn't afford, my family couldn't afford. So that was step one. That got me into, I think, $40,000 of student loans when I graduated. And then on top of that, at the time, in college, you get approved for your first credit card. I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, my limit at the time, I don't know if it was like 2,000 or $5,000, but that's income. That's like part of my income, right? Or that's part of what I can spend every month, even though it's absolutely not true. And I think it's so easy for people to just underestimate the amount of interest they're paying. We go to get a new car, for example, and we look at the monthly payments, but we never think about the total debt. We only think about those monthly payments. And sure, I can afford another $400 a month. And I think actually that's where it starts, where you're only looking at the short term, the monthly payments, instead of looking at your whole picture, your net worth. And that's it's so addicting also to continue to get more credit cards, especially when you keep maxing them out and when you keep getting approved. Because again, like the younger me, I saw debt as a tool to get what I wanted faster. So I didn't have to wait 6 months to save up for the whatever I wanted, or save up for like 2 years for a car. I could just go down, sign some papers, and it's mine. So it's so easy to fall for that instant gratification, and I think a lot of people fall for that.
Oh man, it's wild. We live in a society where it's like, you're barely a legal adult and will let you saddle yourself with this horrible, credit card debt, but also, unforgivable, student loan debt and stuff. But you can't, for instance, it's really tough to get a loan to like start a business, or even, your first mortgage is a bit of going through some loops to get that type of stuff. And this is even before you can even like drink legally, it's like you get all these opportunities to just get all this debt and stuff. So yeah, I see that. I experienced that. That's how a lot of my debt happened. And she's like, "Oh, I have a magic money card. If I swipe this thing, I get what I want, and I'll deal with the
Exactly.
consequences another day." So yeah, I agree with all of that. So I'm curious. So yours was mainly student loans and credit card debt that equated to all the
Yeah.
debt you had.
So that's a good question. I ended up with about 98,000 of the 260 was real estate. 140 approximately was student loans, and then 22,000 was credit cards.
Gotcha. So at this stage, you were was that real estate that you were living in, or was it real estate like investing, trying to do that? What was that?
Yeah, well, this is really funny. So no one's gonna believe me because we're in 2023. We've just gone through this, 2021, the inflation of real estate prices. So remember, this is 2011. I'm in rural Ohio, and we're still coming out of the 2008, 2009 crash. So prices have not recovered. Okay, so that 98,000 was actually on two properties. One was a duplex that I bought for 68, and I ended up selling for 60. So it was not a good investment. And then the other one was a fixer upper, which I got as a short sale for 49,000, and I lived in that one. So it's very cheap prices, but I didn't make anything on the rental property. I actually sold it for a loss. It was not a good investment. And then the one I lived in, I did sell that in 2016 and made a profit on it. But but
So
it wasn't like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
yeah, I
yeah.
think it was maybe right around that point, or maybe a year or two later. Uh, Me and my wife were figuring out all those finance stuff, and I think we had seen some article somewhere that's like, you can buy a house in Detroit for $1,000, and so we're like, maybe we should do that. And then we started thinking about, oh, how much does it cost to renovate, and like what condition is this? So yeah, but yeah, I think that some of those, even in depressed areas like that now, I think the real estate prices are considerably higher, which is a sign of the
That's
times.
funny. Yeah, I think I actually
So
saw that same article about Detroit, and I was very tempted by the way.
there
But
was lots of people doing it. Some people
hmm
did it
yeah.
successfully, but I can't imagine,
hmm
what kind of work that took. And then that's another thing I want to talk about a little bit later. I know that you've been through like putting in some like real elbow grease in the real estate space. But first, let's talk a little bit more about this debt and like getting out of it and stuff. So when you finally had these wake up calls, when you had this debt kind of on your shoulders, and you're trying to deal with this, when you finally decided, okay, I need to fix this situation. one, how much were you making at the time, income wise, and then two, how did you then apply that to starting to like cut down on this debt?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was about when I had those two turning points, I was around 31 years old. I was making around 70,000. So at that point, I had my my bachelor's, my MBA, and I had about I don't know 6 or 7 years of experience. So I was making a decent income. Um, but take home pay was around 48,000, and if you remember earlier I mentioned my total interest I was paying every year was around 16,000.
Hmm.
So I mean that was literally one third of every dollar off of my paycheck was going to interest. Um, so yeah, the income definitely helped. And then the funny thing is, and I've heard other people talk about this, when you actually start focusing on something, so for me it was the debt and just trying to turn around my money. It's crazy. I actually started to get more raises at work and random bonuses. So it is cool how that really does happen. I don't think it would have happened the same way if I hadn't focused so much, on trying to pay that debt off.
That's interesting. So maybe like this self improvement in your finance world, in your personal life, bled over into like improvements and like doing things differently at work. That's cool. That's a cool
Mm,
side effect I hadn't considered.
yes, definitely.
So I mean, you kind of talk about like making 70,000 decent income and stuff, but I still think that a lot of people have this idea that if you have over six figures of debt, that you can't do anything about it unless you make like over six figures, you each year or something. And that I feel like you've basically said is not true. And I feel like what I've seen in my own life and other people's lives is just patently not true. So like, how do you take less than a six figure income and use that to eat away at more than six figures of debt?
Yeah. So again, I go back to that original list where I listed out my debts. I can't remember how many I had. Let's say 9 or 10. I think it was around that number. I think at the time maybe it was 4 credit cards. I know I had 4 or 5 different student loans and then 2 mortgages. I actually listed them from highest interest rate to lowest rate, which I know people have different opinions on that. For me, since I'm a numbers nerd, I knew that paying the loan off with the highest interest rate was going to be the quickest path to being debt free.
And
So
sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
Is
no,
that
go ahead.
that's the debt avalanche approach? Is that
I
right?
think they call that the debt avalanche, yes, which
And then
by the way,
yeah.
I'm not necessarily a bigger fan of like the debt
Mm,
snowball is a pretty popular method as well.
yep.
I'm happy. I mean, if people can win that way, because I see the benefits, in that method as well. For me, I'm just too much of a numbers nerd, and I was so committed to getting this paid off that it didn't matter if I had a quick win or not. I was doing it. Um, so yeah, so that was really it. It was starting to pay as much as I could toward that biggest debt. And then what happened? So I started this around, I think it was like right at the end of 2011. Um, I think mid 2013, maybe August of 13, I sold that duplex. So I know that's like a year and a half ish, where I definitely made progress, but it's funny, like until I sold that duplex, I wasn't like you couldn't see a huge reduction in my debt, even though I was paying pretty well. Um, I did a couple things to reduce the total interest. I refinanced my house at the time, so I mentioned I bought that fixer upper. I also, when I bought that, they gave me kind of like a I'll call it a hybrid construction loan where they gave me a little bit of money to remodel it. And I was able to refinance for a much lower rate because those construction loans, because of the way they're set up, they're at a higher rate. So I did that, and then I had built some equity in the house. So I actually I took one of my higher credit cards. I think the balance was maybe 13,000 with a 19% rate. I consolidated the credit card into the mortgage, which again, I know most financial experts say don't do because I'm taking on more of the risk myself through the mortgage. But for me, again, I was paying all this debt off. I didn't care if what kind of collateral it had. It was going to be paid off. So I know I saved maybe 2,000 a year on interest just from that transaction. And then the other thing I found was 0% credit card. So it did help. I had a pretty decent credit score. And I took full advantage of these. I think I had, like I said, I think I had like 4 open cards, and then in addition, they may have sent me another one. But I had a little Excel tracker. I looked at all the 0% offers I had. They each last about 12 months, so I knew how much I could pay off within 12 months, and then I would transfer from the highest interest debt to that 0% credit card. So I literally just kept doing that until it was gone. Now there is a 3% transfer fee when you do that. So, I was still paying 3%, but it's a lot better than like 8.5% that I was paying on the student loans at the time, plus the other credit card debt I had. So for me, it was like little tricks that helped me, plus literally just throwing every every extra dollar at that debt every month.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, like here's my opinion on all that stuff. It's like, uh, if there was a one size fits all approach for finances, then that would be it'd be such a simplified, easy world we could live in. But that's just super unrealistic. So as much as I appreciate the voices in finance that give that big general sweeping advice like Dave Ramsey, minus any opinions I have on him in particular, but the sweeping advice, credit cards are evil, you shouldn't have any debt, how you do not do consolidation loans, whatever. That's fine as long as you take that as general advice and then decide on your own personal stuff, and I think you're going to find your own path. And if you're a really responsible earner and stuff and you have a plan like you just laid out to erase your debt, well then what's the harm in doing it the way you did it? Like part of our credit card stuff was also rolled into the home loan and stuff, and I'm so grateful we did that and we've done it very responsibly. And there's all kinds of different ways to slice the thing as long as you end the same result, which is you get rid of all the bad debt or maybe all debt, and then you also come out financially free, building towards like a wealthy future. Then it's like, who cares how you got there? You won.
Exactly. Yep.
So talk to me a little bit about how you talk about this, your turning points. You talked about the debt, some of the things that led you making the decision. But like, I don't know about you, but like I had to like beat some of this stuff like through my skull, my thick skull, my stubborn skull. I had to like hit some breaking points. Like, how do people who are, they see these things, they see, okay, there's $6,500, there's 6,500 in clothing that I should learn to, that makes more sense to me. How do you like get to that breaking point or convince your stubborn brain that this is the right path forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for me, I always had that goal to retire early, and I knew hanging like with these debt payments, it wasn't going to happen. And then another thing I think about, so I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I started really getting serious about what does retirement look like for me? Like, I don't want to sit here and do nothing. I also don't want it to be super tight. Like, I want to have some freedom. Um, and you know what? I never, when I picture my retirement, I never picture myself like writing out bills or paying bills or anything like that. So just debt doesn't belong during retirement. Unless I don't know, there could be some exceptions, of course. But for me, it was the key to that was like step one to retire early. Step two is investing, and there's some other things, obviously. But step one was really get out of debt, figure out how to conquer this. I got a funny story for you. And this I think happens to other people. So again, I didn't grow up with much money. So in my head, I always had this awareness that I always felt poor, like especially compared to all the people in my school. I just felt like I was the poor kid. My mom was always picking me up after practice in the worst vehicle, and I was always embarrassed, whatever. But then a few years ago, actually during this debt-free journey, I was actually at the store with a friend and her niece, and I picked up a couple things to buy. And then at the checkout, I was like, you know what? I do not need this. Like, I'm trying to get out of debt. So I kind of just sat them over there. And she goes, "Oh, you're so poor," or something. And at the time, I was actually making a decent income. I was making a lot of progress on my debt. But in my head, like I still believed it. I actually had like an emotional reaction because I was like, "Oh, like I guess I still kind of believe that, even though like I had made this progress." And I think that happens to a lot of people. Like we have these experiences really young, or we've got these family members or friends around us who raised us, and they're telling us certain things, and there's a lot of negativity that comes with money sometimes, like shame, guilt, fear. There's all these negative feelings, and I feel like a lot of us bring those feelings with us, even if in adulthood we're not really in the same position we were as kids. So I think that holds a lot of people back. And to be honest, I didn't even know I felt that inside. It's like something that you don't necessarily recognize every day. I was actually, I thanked my friend for, pulling that out of me, but not everyone has that ability to get that pulled out.
So yeah, that's an interesting element. I know that a lot of people there's kind of the struggle of the mind when it comes to money in various ways, shame, like you talked about, but also, abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset, stuff like that. But also, how you were brought up and how you live those early, formative years, that kind of dictates a lot of it. So, some of that obviously very unhealthy. You got to get over certain aspects of it. But I mean, is there like a healthy balance there? Because like in that moment, maybe you had an unhealthy reaction, emotionally about like being defensive or something about it, but at the same time, you made a good financial decision out of it. So, is there a balance there? Can you like ride that line successfully?
Yeah, I think it's actually taking time to, like, dissect your feelings, and the problem is it's not this necessarily won't your feelings or the truth won't necessarily just come to the surface. So I think this takes time. Maybe, when it if you like journaling or writing out your feelings or whatever it is, I think that's definitely helpful because when you don't really know what you're feeling, and to be honest, when I started this debt journey, like when I knew my net worth was negative and I wasn't actually doing anything about it, I felt ashamed of it and I wasn't real proud of myself. But again, it wasn't enough. Even though I felt ashamed, it wasn't enough for me to actually take action. But the more you release of that, stop blaming yourself for maybe the past or whatever happened. It's so much better. The problem is you have to actually take the time to try to get those feelings out of your system,
Hmm.
because they get embedded in there, and it's tough to let go of those sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a part. So once you kind of get through the debt kind of portion of your story, and you move into focusing more so on the wealth building portion of it, there's a part here that I really appreciated that you did that I don't think a lot of people do. I know I didn't think about this. I went from having the debt and stuff to like immediately I guess I got to invest this and just pick something or whatever. Whereas you didn't feel that like you maybe you felt it, but you were able to like take a step back and go, okay, I don't know what I should be doing with my money to invest it. So you like waited. You chose to put your money into a certificate of deposit, and lock in some interest rate in a very safe capacity. But like I'm curious about your like mindset behind like deciding to like be in a holding pattern and be okay with that, and like how you got there.
Yeah, good point. So the one good thing that happened, I actually started when I started to turn around this money, I started to pay off the debt. I actually started contributing 10% of to my retirement,
Hmm.
which was actually really good for me because after the 5 year debt journey or debt payoff journey, I had over 100K in my retirement, so that was exciting. And I wasn't touching that money. It never came into my bank account. It was straight off my paycheck, which was good for me. But like you said, then I paid off my debt, and all of a sudden, like I had extra money because I was used to paying thousands of dollars every month to my debt payments. And when you no longer have those payments, and it starts to build up in your checking account pretty quickly. So for me, I was very, very afraid I was going to lose this money back in my 20s when I wasn't managing money well. I had fallen for some get rich quick schemes. I tried the Forex, I tried penny stocks, and I didn't go about them very well. So I knew my old self, and I did not want to revert back to that. So that there was a bit of fear. And for me, I decided just to put this money after I had a few thousand. I put it in a CD for about, I can't remember, to be honest, if it was a 6 month CD or a year, but I let it sit in that CD for a while. And then I think after a year, I had also accumulated some more in my checking account. I decided it was time. I did some research. I looked at some index funds, some ETFs. I also talked to a good friend of mine who is pretty wealthy, on her own. So I knew that what she was doing was probably pretty smart. And then based on that, I decided to actually open an account at a discount broker and invested it, which probably wasn't the right. I can go into that, but yeah, I did wait just because I was scared. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mean, there's fear, and you can look at that as like a negative thing, but also I think it's like a wise thing. It's like, okay, I have this feeling, so I'm not going to go the opposite and like try to kill this feeling right away and confront it, but I'm also not going to be completely, on board with it, and that I'm going to do nothing. So you took action, but it was like safe action, which I thought was cool. But I feel like now is a really good environment to do something similar. It's like mean, most, high yield savings accounts are between like 3.5 and 4%, so and I imagine at the time maybe your CD wasn't even that high. I don't know what the
I
rate
think it was
was.
1%. Yeah, it was nothing.
Yeah. So like is now especially a good time in your opinion to like, if you're before you jump into it, before you like learn what to invest in,
Mhm,
have some money, less than 250K obviously, unless the
mhm, yeah.
insurance is higher than that in a high yield?
Yeah, definitely. And like you said earlier, I mean, everyone's money path, everyone's life really is different. And that means we all treat our money differently. We all have different perspectives. We all have different levels of fear. So I definitely agree that, if you feel too much fear or too much insecurity about investing in the stock market right now because of the economic situation, then definitely go for a CD. When you feel more secure about your money, you're gonna do better with your money. Yep.
Yeah. So was it literally day one of I'm gonna turn my financial life around? I'm gonna start paying off debt that you also started doing 10% into your retirement?
It was roughly, I think I may have started investing in retirement just a few months earlier. Actually maybe like 6 months earlier. But yeah, pretty much around the same time. I was starting to get my act together, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
I'm very slow, so I'm a pretty late bloomer, so everything takes a little a little longer with me, I think.
Well, so I say the same thing. I tell people I'm a late bloomer when it comes to my finances and a lot of other
Yep.
things in life too. I have to kind of beat stuff over my head before I learn it. Maybe three tries, and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
I get it now. But at the same time, less than zero, negative. What I think looking
Yeah.
at your tweets, it was like negative 99K when you took your
Mhm.
assets out of the equation from your liabilities and stuff. Um, so negative net worth to millionaire net worth in 10 years, that's not slow. That's fast. So yeah, maybe you were slow to like make certain decisions, but I mean, within context and I think that there's aspects to it that maybe happen a lot quicker, which is really cool. Even though you might think it was a little bit slower to do certain parts of it. So if you were going to do it over again and you were going to start that, investing day one as you attack your debt, would you do it that way? Would you invest while attacking it? Would you recommend most people do that? And then also, would you recommend that, 401k at your work is that the first place you start?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that's actually a really good question. If I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't change a thing, only because, like I said, it was a 5-year journey for me, and it was a rough
Hmm.
journey. And having to start at zero would have been really tough. I mean, obviously, I could have probably paid it off a little sooner, but I was able to start at like 119,000 net worth, which was nice, and then that just went up from there. But um, yeah, so I don't think I'd change anything about how I did it. Sorry, I'm missing the second part of your question. What was that?
Oh, and yeah, just if you could do it over, would you start with the 401k again, and then
Oh
also
yeah,
would you still
right.
advocate for people to consider doing debt payoff and investing at the same time, or pick one or the
Yeah.
other?
Right. No, I mean, and to be honest, I do advocate for doing both at the same time. I do understand there's like an advantage to focusing on one thing at a time, but the power of compounding it's just so great that, the sooner you can start investing, the better. Um, Now you mentioned like 401k. I did have an employer sponsored 401k where they matched. If you have if you have that ability to get the match, that's number one. I do suggest the Roth. Now, I personally invest some in Roth, some in traditional, but definitely you want to take advantage of it if you can. And then if you don't have that 401k option, there's always the IRA option. If you're self-employed, there's that SEP plan. So yeah, yep. But definitely get the match if you can take advantage of that.
So where does like a standard brokerage account, just a plain vanilla
Yeah.
one, where does that fit into this equation?
Yeah, so that's if it's non-retirement related, for me, that was after paying off the debt. So I do think there is some focus. So, paying off your consumer debt is definitely first. And then when it comes to mortgage debt or, debt on appreciating assets, that's where it gets a little gray. I don't necessarily recommend one or the other. Starting that brokerage account is pretty exciting. So I don't know. Again, that's a personal choice if you wanna pay off your mortgage first or, Fidelity account first.
Yeah. So I kind of view things like my Roth IRA as kind of a backup plan. Like
Mhm.
I want to build a massive brokerage account and other, and I'm big in crypto and stuff, which is a whole different ball game. But in all these different things, I'm focused on all that stuff. Whereas I've kind of view the Roth as something I don't want to even think about. I just want to put money into it, and then one day, if everything else goes bad, I still
Mhm.
have retirement money set aside. But if I'm actually going to live off of this in the next decade, I'm going to pull out of my main brokerage and stuff. So, like, how do you view those things, or how do you suggest people think about that?
I view it the exact same way that you do. So I have a Roth IRA as well, and then I've got my 401k balance. Both of those, I just have no plans of touching. They're both in index funds, and they're both completely safe. I'm not going to invest that money in single stocks or anything different. Um, yeah, so exactly that. I'm not planning to touch those till I'm 59 and a half at the earliest. And then the same as you, like I have this non-retirement account where that is the account I'm funding right now to try to have the ability to retire early, and then that would be what I would live off of.
So, what are the biggest holdings in the retirement funds? And you said in index funds and ETFs. Which ones are you buying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in it's a large cap. I think it's something like an S&P 500 at work.
Hmm.
I don't think it's any like ticker that I would recognize or you would recognize. My Roth IRA is in VOO, so that's a pretty well-known
Hmm.
ETF. Again, S&P 500. Um, yeah, I'm not real when it comes to those. I'm not real like I don't stray too much from the S&P 500. They're pretty they've proven themselves, those companies, and I'm not too worried about that.
If you were talking to my friend, maybe you know him on Twitter, a decade investor, Colin.
Oh yeah,
He has a
yep.
VOO tattoo. He's all about the VOO. Yeah,
I do know
I like
him.
the
Yeah.
S&P 500. I like VOO. What about in the brokerage account? What are you investing into in the brokerage?
Yeah, so I have a it's funny. I have different strategies when it comes to that. So I'm a bit more of a risk taker. So on some of my riskier companies there's a real estate company I like, EXPI. Um, there I have Tesla. Then I have a few that are like dividend paying funds. So I have JP Morgan Chase. I've got PXD, which is an energy company, which has done pretty well. Um, Johnson and Johnson maybe. And then I also have I do like QQQ as well, which I know it's an
Hmm.
index fund, but it's a bit higher risk. It's mostly
Hmm.
technology companies. So yeah, those I mean to be honest, that's pretty much what makes up my portfolio.
That's cool. So, I mean, even with you being maybe a little bit riskier than just S&P 500, it still sounds like you're keeping it relatively focused and pretty simplified. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't have like I when you look at my account, it's not like this long list of stocks. It's really maybe maybe this long. I do try to keep it simplified. I only have a couple non-retirement account. I think I have two, oh, actually maybe three accounts. Um, and really they're all at the same broker with the exception of one, and that's for a special purpose. So I do try to keep it simple. I do talk about keeping your money simple. Same with, again, getting out of debt. I only have one credit card. I have one bank account, well, one personal account, one, business account. So I really try to keep everything when it comes to money simple. Simple
I
has
like
always
that.
done the trick for me.
What's the single credit card of choice?
It's funny. So again, like it's not even it's through my regional bank. Like it's a small
Okay.
bank. So yeah, it's nothing you would know of. And again, like I had it, it was convenient. It was the one I
Hmm.
didn't close. Like when I was doing all the 0% transfers, I
Hmm.
just decided that was the one I liked the best.
Nice. So now that we've exited the paying off the debt portion of the story, you're in the investing section, which you're even still in, because I'm assuming that your goal might be a bit higher than where you're currently at. So what are you doing now, and what have you been doing to accelerate that wealth accumulation?
Yeah, so I paid off the debt in 2016. 2018 was when I decided to put it in some index funds, and then I kind of got familiar with the stock market. Um, Also, 2018, I decided to flip a house. So that first fixer, I had done a lot of the work myself. My dad's pretty handy, so he helped out. And then the second fixer, I found a real good friend who also kind of wanted to take the leap, and we knew each other pretty well. So it was a good partnership. So anyway, we flipped that house in 2018. Now the problem was, I'm working full time. I'm still working full time. So every single weekend we were at this house. So it was quite a bit. I think it took 9 months. We may not have been there like
Wow.
every weekend, but maybe 80, 90% of the weekends throughout that 9 months we were there. We made a decent profit though, like on which this isn't again like this isn't going to sound like anything because of what we've been through recently, but I think for that house we purchased it for like 60 and profited like 35. We did put some money into it, but it was a pretty good return overall from a percentage perspective. And then so that went well. So then we decided in 2019 to flip another one, and then that one went well. Not quite the percentage of return wasn't quite there though. So then in 2020, we decided to buy another house right at it just, the timing worked out perfect. We didn't plan this, but we bought it right. I think we closed in March of 2020 when everyone was panicked about COVID.
Yeah.
So we got a really nice deal on that one. We actually didn't have to do too much work to it, and then we sold it a year later in 21 for a pretty nice profit, and then bought another one in 21. But this one ended up being, it's more of a vacation. So it's not really income producing, which is kind of a bummer. But I do use it quite a bit. So I would like to get back into the flipping and, buy, selling. But right now, yeah, I'm just accumulating real estate.
Very cool.
um, with, yeah.
That the one you did with your friend, is that the one that was the hoarder house?
That was, yeah, 2018.
Okay.
Yes, it was
S-
horrible.
So going through that, and given that it took you 9 months, and every weekend,
Mhm.
but you did have a nice return. Would you do that again, or would you never have one like that again?
No, we would probably do it again, to be honest. So she also helped me out on the 2019 one. The 18 one, I hadn't quite convinced her that this was a good deal. So the first few weekends were not, they were fun for me, but they weren't fun for her.
Hmm.
I mean, we ended up taking so much trash out of that house. It
Yeah.
was crazy. The second one actually was an estate sale. So we bought it from someone who had died actually in the home. So that was another interesting one. It was kind of
Mm.
lots of again, lots of stuff. It wasn't quite as hoarded as the prior one, but it was just as messy in some case or some ways. So yeah, so those are, it's funny. I'm always up for a project. So yeah, I like to clean things up. I like to make communities, streets look nice. So I'm definitely still up for it. Yep.
So do you think is that a real estate flipping hack? And is that something worthwhile looking at if you're willing to put in like the extreme amount of work? Is that something that people maybe should consider so you can get a better deal on the house, and then once it's actually flipped, it can actually sell for more and have a higher profit margin?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the advice of, buy the ugliest house on the block. That's
Yeah.
that's literally the strategy you need if you want to flip property and make money. Um, and now, obviously, if the market is going up like it has in these recent years, we didn't do too much to the 2020 purchase or the 21 purchase, and they've just appreciated naturally. But when real estate gets back to its normal, like 3% appreciation a year, then yeah, you're right. The ugliest house, the most, the hoarder house, the house with the pet stains. I mean, those are the the diamonds in the rough you're looking for.
Oh, if we could only just go back to sub 4, sub 3% mortgage
Such
interest rates. Wouldn't
exactly.
that be nice? So, let's talk a little bit about your overall net worth, and if you wouldn't mind kind of breaking down like where that's allocated.
Or yeah, and again, it's not. I'm just not a real complicated person. So I think it's roughly 60% is in my 401k in retirement accounts. Um, about I don't know, 25 to 30% is in real estate, and then another 25-ish is in my non-retirement investments. So in that brokerage
Nice.
account. Yeah.
So at this stage, are you still really like super actively contributing to the retirement stuff, or have you eased off of that and are you more, enthused about the brokerage and the real estate? Like where are you going right now?
That's a really good question. So before, when I was paying off my debt, I was contributing 10% to my retirement. After I paid it off, I was contributing 22%. And you're right. Actually, just this year, I decided to bring retirement down to 10% because I'm on track with that. I would rather have the cash now to either invest in the stock market or invest in some real estate that I hopefully soon will be purchasing. So yeah, so it's funny how your priorities change. But definitely kicking it up to that 22% for roughly, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, that really pushed that over the,
Hmm.
over the top. So that account I really don't have to touch because it's going to be well over $1 million by the time I'm 59 and a half. So I'm not even worried. So you're right. It's kind of nice to kind of get some of those out of the way so you don't have to worry about them.
Very cool. And when it comes to real estate stuff, so yeah, I know you just kind of mentioned that you want to look at doing maybe some more flipping and stuff. So is it going to continue to just be buy a house, fix it up, flip it, sell it for profit, or do you have any desire to be a landlord or have Airbnbs, or like what's your thinking? What's your plan with all
Mhm.
that stuff?
I have been giving this a lot of thought lately. I don't quite know the final answer yet. I Yeah, it's funny. So after that duplex, that horrendous purchase from 2009, I that really it really stained me.
Yeah.
It was not good. The tenants were horrible. And then the funny thing is the 2020 property, it was actually near a beach, and we had some tenants there as well, like short-term tenants. And again, I got the worst tenants. So part of me just wants to stay away from rentals, but there is a part of me, to be honest, that kind of wants to get into that again. Um, at this point, no, I'm not. I'm just going to flip the properties. For me, that's more fun to actually see the tangible change versus dealing with some of the tenants. But I don't know. It could be my process and screening tenants. I'm sure there's some improvements I could make.
Yeah. So I know you've so I've you have tons of really awesome threads on Twitter, and you have lots of great threads about like how to become a millionaire and like your story and the habits and things, mindsets. All the stuff is really cool and really important. But one thing that you talk about, that I talk about, that a lot of people talk about is most millionaires have multiple income sources. So you've got your 9 to 5. What other income sources do you currently have? And then maybe also let's talk a bit about which ones are you thinking about building? Or are you working on?
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, so my 9 to 5 right now is the biggest source of income for me. But I'm definitely working on the passive income. So I have some income through my blog, which I've been building and I've actually just recently redesigned it, so I'm pretty excited about that. I also have some income through the dividends. So I'm accumulating enough. I mean, my goal is to make a decent amount every year off those dividends. So that's another one. And then, it's funny. I have a couple companies sponsoring me. So I make a little money like through Twitter, through the blog. So yeah, I mean, I'm making some money. It's nothing to be too like too excited about yet. Um, but I've been working on it. So far it's funny. This year we're in April and I've already made double what I made last year. So it's pretty exciting.
That's
But we're
awesome.
not talking like a ton of money here. So little by little, it keeps growing. So I feel like year after year, it is gonna, get to get to a point where it's actually significant.
Well, that's the fun of the journey. I mean, my and on
Mhm.
here on YouTube, my first 6 months it was $0, and then my first full year when I actually became monetized, I was like, oh, this is cool. But then my second year full monetization, in my first like quarter, I made more than I made the entire year previous. So it's like
Nice.
you have to spend all this time now building the foundation for
Yeah.
things that will hopefully turn into something later, which is it's fun, but also you have to be patient. uh,
Oh,
so the blog is winwithyourmoney.com.
yep.
Yeah, it's cool. So you're doing some sponsorship stuff. What else are you doing to kind of
Mhm.
monetize the blog? Advertising? Like, what do you?
Yeah, so I have on the blog, I've got some advertising right now. I did a course in November. Yeah, I guess that's a revenue stream. I forgot about that. Yeah, so I have this course, which is the funny thing is, the whole reason I joined Twitter was because I wrote this book and about my story about, money, which is not published yet, but I decided to actually do a course based on the book. So it's kind of cool. So I was able to, put some of the illustrations, some of the examples that I had written about and described in the book. I put them in a PowerPoint presentation for the course. So that's available on the blog as well.
Yeah, that is that Win with Your Money 101, the one on
Yep.
Udemy
Yep.
or Udemy. I don't know how you say it. Udemy or
Yeah, something
Udemy.
like that. Udemy,
Uh,
something like that.
so you've actually written 4 books. I said 3 books, but I didn't realize the
Well,
one
but
you is
yeah, no
hadn't
one
been
has
published
access
yet.
to that fourth one.
Okay.
I'm
Do you
being
plan to
patient this time.
when do you plan to publish it?
Well, it's I'm looking for an agent right now, so it
Okay.
could be, yeah. The other 3 have self-published, which may end up happening. I'm not quite ready to do that yet. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully in the next year.
Well, that's super exciting. Well, that's fun. Something to look forward to
Yeah.
in the future. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about specifically, and I feel like it's maybe one, maybe not the biggest, but certainly one of the biggest kind of themes across your Twitter and maybe most of your messaging, and probably on a lot of your blog and stuff, is uh, like all these action steps are fine. Like, deciding you need to make these decisions and and actually doing these actions to become richer and wealthier and pay off your debts, everything is great, but it's all based on like your mindset. I want this tweet I found of yours that I really liked was just change your thoughts, change your world, which is like, it's like this power of belief, which I'm a huge proponent of, because I really believe in this. Like, if you think you can do it, then you probably can. So maybe you could
Mhm.
talk a little bit about how that's like played a role in your story. I know you've already touched
Sure.
on it, but like I feel like this is
Mhm.
so important that I'd love it if you could kind of drive that point home a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so when I was a kid, actually, I played sports, and it's funny. My coaches, I didn't realize it at the time, but my coaches were just like, repeatedly putting stuff in my head, messages in my head. For the most part, they were positive. Telling me I could do it, push harder. Normal things that coaches say. And I didn't realize actually like how powerful those messages were, because they were repeating in my head all the time, like that I can do it and I need to be better. So naturally, I kind of pushed myself, I think, more just because I had those messages in my head that I could figure it out. Like I could do what I wanted to do if I gave it the commitment that it needed. So I kind of knew that subconsciously, but I never actually thought about it, if that makes any sense. Um, I had those messages drilled in my head, but I didn't necessarily like think each day, oh, be better or whatever. I didn't tell myself that or anything. Um, but then in 2020, a friend recommended the book by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. I read that book and I realized, oh, wow, like, oh, okay, I kind of understand why I push myself because, people my whole life have been like pushing me, which is a good thing. And those messages have just gone into my subconscious mind without me really thinking about it. Um, so that book, I mean, it woke me up. It actually kind of motivated
Mm.
my book, and actually, I started a different book. So there's a little story behind that. But I really went into this whole like research project of understanding the mind, understanding the power of belief. It's just to me, it is incredible how powerful our minds are, and it's something like I kind of knew, but I never really gave enough thought to. So for me, you're right. Like mindset is huge because, and I think that's again the first step of changing your life, changing your money, changing your physique, whatever you want to do. I think you've got to get your mindset around it first. And that book for me was kind of like the I don't know what the right word is, but the catalyst, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah. So I mean, I think, yeah, I agree with you about like, belief is this kind of fundamental thing. But I think you would agree with me that say that like, you can't just believe something and then expect it to just happen. It also requires you to do the things, but to do those things successfully or to reach, those big, kind of big goals that you have and stuff is like next to impossible if deep down inside you're like, I can't do this, or I'm not going to be able to do this. This is for other people. It's not for me. That kind of like
Mhm.
self-talk. So I'm curious, like on a daily or weekly or whatever basis, how do you practically uh, talk to yourself in those ways to give yourself those reassurances, to give yourself that confidence, that belief that you can then go and do things. And one more piece of context here, like Twitter, for a great example, it's very overwhelming. There's how many millions of Twitter accounts, and none of them ever gain any followers or do anything. And yet,
Right.
since 2021, you started this Twitter account. Now it's 100. You have twice as many followers on Twitter as I do. It's a very wildly successful account. But it's very easy for you to start that process and gone. I can't compete. It's saturated.
Right.
I can't do
Hmm.
this. Yet you
Yeah.
did it. So maybe talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, that's actually really funny because I started Twitter in May of 21. August of 21, I had 11 followers. So, over
Wow.
4 months, I hadn't figured it out.
Yeah.
But for me, it's really like it's the why. Like why, and I know a lot of people say this, but it's really true. Why do you want something? And for me, I really want like I want to push this message out that anyone can win with their money. Like, there is nothing special about me. I want people to have that hope. So my why is really strong, and really that's what gets me through every day. And like you said, Twitter can, I mean, it's tough to come up with threads, and I know some of my threads repeat sometimes, but it's, there's a lot to it. It takes time. It takes time to talk to people and meet different, answer questions, things like that. Uh, so for me, again, it's reminding myself of my why. I've kind of come up with a little, again, since reading that book, I've come up with this little morning routine, I guess you could call it, where I start with gratitude. Again, this takes like 30, 60 seconds. I literally just think of, 3 to 5 things that I'm thankful for that happened either that morning or the day before. They're simple things. Like I got an awesome night's sleep, which doesn't happen every night. They're not like extravagant things, and they're not necessarily big things. They're just some things that, it's easy to take for granted. So that's number one. That takes like 30 seconds. Then I do meditate because for me, like I used to, and I still probably do this, I would let like work or life or whatever's going on, I would just let it stress me out. And again, I probably still fall for this sometimes, but I think because of meditation, I'm able to handle my stress a lot better. I, um, it's interesting. Like I used to be such a skeptic of meditation, and this whole journey that I've kind of been on has really made me realize that, it actually does help me. It calms me down. It lets me look at situations differently. I understand that there's a bigger, I don't have to get wrapped up in these little molehills. I can kind of take a step back. Um, so meditation's great for me. Yeah, and that's pretty much how I start every morning. And then I do write a bit. So whether it's a blog, a tweet, a thread, a script, whatever it is, I try to write about every morning. Probably not quite every morning, but those things, coming up with that little routine has really like it's helped me, as well as I do get up a bit earlier. So I get up about an hour and a half earlier than I used to. So it's around 5 now. And the funny thing is I'm not tired in the morning. I get up and it's good. The old me, I would have said, "Oh my gosh, like I'm tired at 6:30 when I woke up." But now because I wake up, I feel like I've got this purpose. It's just a lot easier to get the day started, and I'm ready, ready to go for it.
That's super cool. So it's something that you said that is, definitely I'm a big believer in, which is expressing gratitude and stuff. It's like you can set goals and you can achieve those goals. You can get to the end of that goal. And if you don't like recognize what you did and who helped you get there and what that affords you, things in life, then it's just like a hollow, empty thing, and you're just ready to move on to the next thing. So, like, how did you? So, I'm assuming that once upon a time, a goal was get out of debt, and then the next thing was like
Right.
become a millionaire. Some other goals in between there. But like when you hit those things, how did you let the each of those milestones not become like an empty thing, or maybe it was, maybe it's a
Yeah.
lesson learned there, but like how did you go, okay, I'm happy with this thing I've done, I can appreciate it, now I'm going to set something else for a different reason, but it's not just because I'm
Mhm.
not satisfied always to be chasing. Like how did that work out for you?
Yeah, no, that's actually I am one that probably doesn't take the time to actually like celebrate when I achieve something.
Hmm.
I'm ready to move on to the next thing. But actually, when I got out of debt, I did take a vacation. It was like one of the most fun vacations of my life. So I did actually, take a break,
Awesome.
celebrate, and then I came back. I will tell you though, then my next goal was to become a millionaire, and maybe not right off the bat. Like I may not
Yeah.
have realized it at the beginning, but at some point I said,
Hmm.
"Oh my gosh, like this is doable if I keep, investing."
Yeah.
And then at some point, I don't know what year it was, but I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is never going to happen." So I finally realized like just going for a certain net worth, that's not going to actually motivate you. Like enough the money the money is awesome, but it's not enough to actually motivate you. The money is kind of the means, it's not really the end. I think, and now I know that, so I I set goals a lot differently. So I'm not like trying to hit a certain net worth. I'm actually, I'm trying to get my book published, for example. So there's other things that I want, or flipping a house, or whatever the goal is. It could be anything. But it's less about the money and more about like the greater why around why I'm doing it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So, obviously, you're a millionaire now. Obviously, you probably have some additional goals in the future. Maybe you even have a number that's like, I could never work again, and this is my number. Or, maybe not. But maybe you have some goals in the future. Um, like what is the reason why you want to be financially free? What is money? What does this money and wealth buy you? Like, what does it give you that,
Mhm.
other than maybe physical things, which is what everybody equates money to? But what do these things buy you, and why do you want this financial freedom?
Yeah, so for me, so my end why, like my major why, it's a secret. Um,
Okay,
it does involve it does involve buying an organization, and with that I could help a lot of people.
that's
Um,
cool.
so yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. I don't know if that's ever gonna come. I mean, like I tell myself it's gonna happen, but it's a lot of money. So we'll see if I make it there or not. Um, but yeah, it's more about like you said, it's my goals aren't necessarily always about me or material things. It's so funny. Like I used to be much more material than I am today. Today I'm happy just, I live in a pretty old house. My car is it's a 2016 car. It's got like over 80,000 miles on it. I don't care. Um so it's funny how the possessions and the things actually don't really matter as much when you start really like I don't know, again, it might be meditation. Like I just have this different awareness where or maybe it's clarity where I know what I want and it's more actually about like reaching others than like things for me, I guess I could say.
Very cool. Yeah, I drive a 13-year-old car with 150,000 miles on it. We live in what is almost certainly one of the worst houses on the entire street,
Excellent.
especially now that Austin has just exploded. So, I talk about some of these things on Twitter. I'm sure you do too. It seems like there's lots of millionaires out there who drive the Toyotas, the paid off Toyotas,
Mhm.
who don't wear the designer clothes and stuff. But that doesn't mean, we don't buy anything ever. But
Right, right.
like how like where's the balance, or how do you think about that? Because a lot of people see that stuff and hear people like you say those things, and they think, oh well, what's the point of accumulating all this money if you never have fun or never get to enjoy it? So like, what's your response to people who think like that when they hear those things?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny. It's a good point. Like I think if I felt constrained or like felt like I was sacrificing, then sure, I understand them. But to be honest, like I don't feel constrained. I feel like if I wanted a new car, I could just go buy one, but I just don't want one. Like my priorities have changed. And that's not something I would have understood in my 20s. I would have said like oh my gosh, you have the cash, go get the car, why not? So it's funny how again, it's like a mindset shift of priorities. Um, I don't know how to describe it, and it's funny, I don't know how I would even describe it to my own 20-year-old self, to get that message through that, hey, your priorities just change. Like you realize your image and actually, you know what I think it might be? For me, I don't know if this is like common, but it's actually a confidence too. Like I don't feel like I have to impress others, and I know we probably both write about that sometimes, but, I just don't feel a need that, like, I have to impress anyone. Um actually, I have a funny story, so a little off track, but we were flipping that house in 2019, and it was a really old house that had plaster, so we were taking the plaster down, which is a really dusty process. So me and my friend were really dusty, we went to a local sub shop and we probably looked horrible. Like we probably had dirt on our faces, dirt on our clothes. And then this family comes in and they're all clean. I think yeah, I don't know. They probably just came from a nice, I don't know, nice party or something. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, like I bet we have a lot more, a lot more net worth than they do, but we look so horrible. So anyway, I don't know if it's like inner confidence or what it is, but there's just not a need to like feel like you have to be showy or impress anyone anymore. Um, I don't know how to describe it, any better than that.
That's what you just said is very interesting. I've had that experience. I mean, most of my t-shirts I wear like $7 blank t-shirts and stuff, and I don't really care about the really showy things. But when I'm out in public and stuff, and I see people who are fancy or whatever, old me, once upon a time, be when I was bad in debt and didn't spend all my money, didn't know the first thing about personal finance, I would be impressed by that. These days, because, and not that I'm like better than anybody else, because I have accumulated some money, and again, there's billionaires out there who have many multiples what I could ever dream of having in my entire lifetime. But like, it gives me an inner confidence, among other things, other lessons I've learned over the years. But that's one of the things. Like, I've built this thing, for myself with my own two hands, hard work. It's given me this freedom and these options and stuff. And I don't feel, I don't feel defensive when I see those people in public. So that's really interesting you brought that up because I haven't really ever thought about that exactly like that, which is pretty cool. So one other thing too is as you're talking about, it just remind me of the idea that you know again talking about that same kind of thing, which is fancy sports cars and designer clothes and stuff is impressive, but what impresses me, and maybe it's the same for you now, is not seeing all that, which certainly it's cool, but it's impressive when I see people who can, like, at the drop of a hat, take time off work or go on a vacation, or they can buy that fun thing they want to just in that moment or whatever. And maybe that's not, they don't need to drive the fanciest car or whatever. And there's like, that's kind of how I see that balance of, I guess, priorities in life, what these things can buy you, and so maybe for some people it is those fancy things, but yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head about like that balance. So one last thing I want to cover before we wrap this thing up is just talking about, like, what is something you're currently doing, currently working on, currently sharing with the world, or something like that that you're just you're the most excited about.
Yeah, sounds good. It's funny, I actually have 2 things if you don't mind.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, the first is the blog, I mentioned that earlier, so it's, winwithyourmoney.com. I literally, if you go to that blog, I've tried to lay it out so that, if you're getting out of debt, I've got steps on how to get out of debt. If you're investing, new to investing, then there's a couple pages on investing. Um, I highly believe that, again, like I said, mindset is everything. So I've come up with this 5 stages of money, which the first is your mindset stage, figuring out how to change that mindset. And then there's 2 sections on paying off debt. So your, kind of your consumer debt, your bad debt, and then your not necessarily good debt, but your your other debt on appreciating assets, as well as 2 different sections on investing. So your
There's
retirement investing, yeah, and then your
literally a
non-retirement.
title here that says "How to Become a Millionaire. Start here." So yeah, I will
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
link
click
this
on
below because
that.
that's
And
awesome.
then that's your 5 stages of money right there. So then I kind of break out all the different stages. So I'm trying to make it as intuitive as possible to
Hmm.
because that's the one thing I've learned. Like, again, like trying to teach my old self this, I wasn't receptive to that. So I know other people aren't necessarily receptive to hearing this, and it probably feels like lecturing to some people. But for the people that they've had their turning point and they're kind of ready to get better with their money, like this is for them. So anyway, I hope it's a good resource. I'm trying to, uh, refine it over time as I get feedback from people, just so it's helpful. So that's the first thing that I'm really excited about. And then the second thing, there is this new app. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called Follow Invest. And
I
it's
have. Yep.
interesting. It's very interesting. Yeah. So basically, when someone subscribes, they are subscribing to a weekly newsletter, and then they also actually get to see there's leaders on this app, which I'm a leader, and they actually get to see the leader's portfolio. And you can actually see how I'm investing and how all these other people are investing. So it's a very cool idea. They just started. I think they just launched in February. So that's something that I'm kind of excited about. I just think it's a really cool idea. And, again, for beginning investors who really have no idea where to start, it's kind of it kind of gets you over that hump, and gives you like a look directly at the leaders' portfolios.
That's super cool. Get the, like, a little secret sneak behind the scenes look at the
Yeah.
finances stuff. That's cool.
Yeah.
Uh, awesome. Well, yeah, I will definitely down below this on YouTube and in the show notes on the podcast link to your blog and your Twitter and definitely your YouTube also, which everyone should check out.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Thanks.
but is there anywhere else that people should go find you online or in life?
I mean, that's it. Twitter, of course, anyone can reach out to me on Twitter. You can also subscribe to I have a free newsletter on the blog. But yeah, that's really it.
Cool. Well, this has been super fun. Congratulations again on all your success. This is a very inspiring story. And if somebody's listening to this and they're in similar situations, they're not inspired, then I don't know what to say because it inspires me. So thank you very much, Corey, for being on the podcast, and hopefully we can chat again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andy, for having me.